What are the strongholds that need to be removed? What are the places that we need to get ourselves in order to establish that order? Because when it is revealed, full transformation can begin both inwards and then outwards. Because the transformation came onto Isaiah. Isaiah was then told by one of the seraphs or one of the angels, whoever came to him at that moment, and said, "Hey, Isaiah, don't feel broken. Your sin has been atoned for." And so he had an inward transformation, but then God then commissioned him to bring outward transformation to other people by saying, "Here's the call, who's going to go for us?" And Isaiah says, "I'll go," and then suddenly there's an outward commission. See, often people want the ministry and want the outward commission, but they're not prepared to deal with the inwards. And in order for us to move on and to give up our ghosts of unreality, or whatever has been holding us in a certain place or a certain time, and it may be good things as well, as kind of negative things, but in order to do that, in order to break forward and break into our next levels, we have to constantly come back to the inward to allow us then God to take us to the outwards. It's an inward transformation that leads us to the outwards. Do you know, people have been saying this last month, that we're about to prophetically hit into a time of recovery for the church in the UK, and maybe that's in line with political analysis and kind of financial reports that say we're about to hit a time of recovery as well. But I know this: in order to recover, it implies you have to regain something. In order to recover, it implies that there was a more favourable or better state of condition in the past than there is in your present. It also implies that you previously held on to something that you no longer possess. It also implies that there could be a return to a better and a greater time. Let's get some faith actions. Has anybody had a kind of a serious injury? You know, a break or a tear of ligaments, or anything like that? Joy there, Nathan, other people, a serious injury. Do you know, in order to recover, there has to be certain things that you have to adopt. You can't just do the normal stuff and just hope that it just gets better. If you have a more minor injury, then you can do what I think of first aid or kind of physio would say. There's a principle called RICE. Has anyone heard of the RICE principle? Nathan has, I think, and people who played some sport. What they say is RICE: you have rest, ice, compression, and elevation. And you need to administer those four things to recover quickly from your injuries. But if you have a break, or you have a tear of ligaments, well, I tore my ankle tendon and my ankle ligaments playing at Nuneaton one Wednesday evening in about 2002. And I was playing there, and I was playing football for Tamworth at the time, and I was marking a guy called Kevin Francis, who used to play for Birmingham City, who's about 6'9". He's like a massive guy. And so we came out and they start off, and as you line up in the tunnel at Nuneaton, it's a Wednesday night, there's probably about 120 people come to watch. But it's a Wednesday night at Nuneaton, and I remember standing in the tunnel, and as you kind of line up, one of the lads who you played with first turned around and looked at them, stood next to this guy. And I was kind of looking here, and that's where his shorts were. And I'm kind of looking at them like, oh, and stuff like that. And he's kind of like looking, kind of down like that. And I'm going, "Have you ever heard of David?" That's kind of. Won't tell you how it all happened anyway. But in the match, I kind of tore all my ankle ligaments and my tendon. And there's some processes that you have to go through. You have to get yourself medically treated. You have to have a time where they kind of make sure that everything is in proper place before you can recover and before you can start all the other processes sometimes they will put on an extra strapping or a cast so that it holds everything in place. Do you know, I just kind of think that that's a great prophetic picture. I think for some people in this room, God has cast your situation just to hold things in place because He's establishing an order to ready to get you recovered back into a time when He blesses you or moves in your life or takes you into a new level. Maybe God has just had your life on hold so that you learn some things in order for God to help move your life forward. But I'm going to give you some faith actions, because one of the things you can do to recover quickly from sports injuries is that you can actually, when you start to have a good road of recovery, you can start to exercise that joint, that muscle, that area in order to strengthen it again. And I want us to exercise a couple of things in faith actions if we can. So I wonder if you turn to Romans 8. Because often, I found in my life, if I knew what was about to happen, it would change how I deal with my present. If I knew what was just going to be in 2 months' time, my outlook,